Welcome. This is Jack Horak from Tango, and what you're viewing now is my October 2020 monthly Tango Trends video news article. And I'm here today to talk about a topic that's very, very dear and near to me, and that is the issue of outcomes measurement in philanthropy, outcomes measurement in the nonprofit sector. And I have a wonderful guest with me today who has both academic and practical experience with this issue. And her name is Sam Coy. Sam, would you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm Dr. Coy, and I am actually uh, the founder and president of Coy Consulting Group. It's a nonprofit. Well, we work with nonprofit organizations and many other establishments, and hoping to help them remain sustainable in the work that they do in the community. I've been doing this work for about 12 years now. A lot of my background comes from working in the nonprofit industry for about 20 years. And I'm originally from Worcester, Massachusetts.
Yep.
And, I've done a lot of work in that particular community. And I'm excited to be here with you, Jack, today and talk about a very important issue that I think a lot of people are thinking about, especially in
Yeah,
the current times.
you get. And let me do this, Sam. Why don't I try to just frame the issue with an example or something like that,
Yep.
and then leave it to you to comment again because you've both done the research and you're doing the boots on the ground consulting with nonprofits about this issue, right?
That's right.
And in the simplest form, the issue is given how much we know how much money goes into the nonprofit sector, we know how much goes into individual nonprofits. You can measure that. And the issue is how can you tell if they're making progress? And how do you even determine what progress is? In the case of a nonprofit art museum, it's totally different. But in the social services sector, where people are coming in to be served for real human problems, and
Right.
services and treatment is being provided to them, is there a way to measure exactly how long term are the benefits of the services that you provide to people in need of services? And are they turning their lives around, or is it just a palliative for a little short period of time? Um, and it's a complex issue because what you're trying to measure is very subjective. And
Mhm.
there's also external pressure that's coming to you from outside organizations and funders who increasingly are saying, well, all right, you're doing this program, but we want more than your mission statement. We want you to be able to show us what are the deliverables that you can produce given the amount of money we provide to you. So I think that's kind of a very succinct but fair way to describe it. And with that said, how did you get interested in this, and what have you found with your consulting clients? And let me also mention to our audience that, Sam and her company are on the Tango nonprofit above the fold consulting platform. So you can look up under our education and consulting tab on our webpage, you'll find Sam and her business. And I would say you should certainly feel free to reach out to her after viewing this if you have questions or would like to talk to her.
Well, Jack, you pose a very good, very broad question. And I think that there's so many different ways to answer this. And, if I'm being honest, there's so many inspirational things that have happened that have led me down this path to be able to want to work with the community, work with organizations and agencies to help them track and measure the good work that they do. A lot of times when we're working in uh, society and we're looking for societal change, for 30 or 40 years, there's been a lot of talk about outcomes and impact and how to measure and are we helping versus are we hurting and how can we tell? Well, throughout my journey, I've come up with this saying, and I think this really puts a lot of it into perspective. It's, if you can ask it, you can track it. If
Oh,
you can
cool.
track it, you can measure it. If you can measure it, you can see change. And if you can see change, you can change the world. And that's what we're really trying to do here is we're trying to make change and be able to see that whatever the work it is that we're doing, we've improved somebody's life, we've changed a life, we've saved a life, we've changed a whole community in a measurable way. And how do we do that? What are the modules that we could use? What are the elements that we could use? What are the questions that we can ask to verify whether or not we know we've made some sort of change? And if you look at a lot of the different areas in which organizations that are multi-serviced will dive into, it's homelessness, it's poverty, it's, employment, it's education. So if you're looking to see if someone's been able to improve in those areas and then overall their entire life, you get a chance to see step by step, time by time, longitudinal
Right.
tracking, progress tracking over time is what we call it. You get a chance to actually see that work that goes into it and how they actually did it. What were those activities and how much time did we spend doing it?
Yeah, could you talk a little bit more about the longitudinal studies and the way those are what they are, because some people may not be familiar with them, and how you might help a client implement a longitudinal study to get the data that they need.
Yeah, a lot of times organizations are looking to be able to track over time. So if they are working in the community and they're looking to assess whether or not they've helped somebody go from homeless to actual permanent housing, if they've helped somebody go from abusing substances to being sober,
Right.
these things, there are certain elements that you want to be able to track that go into it. So over time, it's tough because a lot of these things you'll get a chance to see over a 2-year period
Sure.
versus 6-month period. Doesn't mean that there isn't progress happening, but you want to be able to see a longer term of whether or not it actually
And
lasts.
as I understand it, that's the longitudinal nature of it, right? I mean, let's say
Mhm.
you treat a father or someone with an addiction issue,
Yep.
and you can measure whether they're still sober and clean in 6 months, but the real issue is long term. Now, a
Right.
year, 2 years out, are they staying clean, and are they, supporting their family, and are they doing things that are positive or not? And so that's the longitudinal, as I understand it, right?
That's
How
exactly
how
right.
far out into the future are you expected to look to
Mhm.
determine how?
Yeah, and that's a great example. A lot of times when we're looking to see that someone is staying sober, there are things that have to happen, right?
Right.
There's things that you want to be able to track, whether or not they're going to their meetings, whether or not they are, staying busy in the community, whether or not they are getting mental health help along the way. I've created a model that the state of Massachusetts, I think, still uses to this day for folks who are coming out of incarceration. And the
Okay.
of it is to be able to reduce the recidivism rate. Well, how do we do that? How do we, be able to affect somebody's life long term so that they're not going back to prison? Well, there's
Right.
some wraparound services that have to happen, and you want to be able to track whether or not those services work, right? Because we don't want to pour money into something that's not working, and that's part of how we get a chance to see whether or not there is some success in the way that we are rolling out programs. So I can tell you, for example, um, as you're doing this work, you have to assess what's happening, and this is how you get best practices. This is where best practices come in.
I see.
what are,
Right. Good
what
point.
are
Good
people doing?
point.
Yeah, what are people doing? Is it working? How do we know it's working? And what measurement tools are we using? The capacity for organizations today is a lot better than it was 20, 30 years ago in terms of being able to have a software system or a outcomes measurement tool that they can actually type into and make sure that they can get those
I,
activities.
I never thought of that, but you're right. I get that makes great sense. The technology is such now that you can collect data in many different ways and then
Yeah,
analyze it. Right.
yeah,
20 years, 30 years ago, you didn't have all these gizmos and gadgets that we have that make this possible. So that's a cool observation, Sam. Yeah, I like
yeah.
that.
And it's tough because funding has a lot to do with it. Capacity has a lot to do with whether or not organizations are able to track this stuff successfully. Organizational sustainability is huge when people are looking for funding to be able to, one,
Right.
promote those services and give those particular communities the services that they need. You also have to have the capacity to do that. So you have to have the staff to do that. You have to have a software system to be able to do that. And in order to do all of that, what is it that they need?
Money.
Funding.
Yeah, money. Yeah. Are you finding that funders are more open to putting money into the longitudinal work, and acknowledging that it's an important part of what needs to be done for a grant to be effective?
Absolutely. This is something that is huge in the in this spectrum and in this particular industry now is accountability.
Yeah.
So in order to get the funding, you want to have to show that you have a plan and a program in place. And if somebody's interested in funding that program and that initiative, then you have to be able to show that what you did was working in some kind of capacity, some kind of way. Now they'll allow for 2 to 3 year grants or multi-year
They
grants to
will.
be able to
Okay. They
do
will.
that. Yep, to give you that capacity. And then at the same time, you have to be able to make sure that you're coming outside of the Excel spreadsheets, right?
Yeah.
Those sort of historic ways of collecting data and then putting into a system that you can get reports out of, that you are able to get a visual um, view of what's happening. The
Are there software
reports that go up
packages?
and down.
I'm sorry. Are there
Yeah,
software packages out there that do this, or is it customized, or?
yeah, there are out of the box SaaS model solutions that are, that you can just customize and bring online, which is so important, so super important now to track this stuff, because as you see the times that we're in with COVID-19 shut everything down and it's got people
Right.
working from home.
Right.
The work still has to happen and
Yes.
the tracking still has to go on. So how do we do this if everybody's at home and people are working off their own Excel spreadsheets or their own desktop or their own laptop and things like that. So we want a single point location where everybody can log into
I see.
what's happening.
That makes sense. Let me ask you this. What would a sample consulting assignment for you be like? Let's say I were a Tango member, and I'm getting questions about this from board members, from the funders in the community. And let's say I'm a social service agency that works in the social service sphere, whether it's addiction or homelessness or whatever. I mean,
Right.
how would you approach a nonprofit that is totally new to this and all of it, but realizes that it's got to get ahead of this,
Yep.
but is at square one? And how do you take them from square one to the point where they've got a system in place?
Great question. And this is something that is the money question right here, is
Right.
how do we get started? And believe it or not, I think that most organizations that have are grassroots organizations are beginning in this process of helping. There is a systemic way of doing things that they have already.
Okay.
So with their logic model is usually a start. You've got to kind of start somewhere. Usually it's with that. There is some sort of qualitative or quantitative data that they want to collect.
Right.
Um, and a lot of times people start off by counting, right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
you're working in a community, and in that community you are, serving a particular population. How many people did we serve is usually the first question. Of those people that we served, how many are African American, Caucasian,
Right.
Hispanic,
Right.
right? Of that population, how many are homeless? So you get a chance to start collecting some superficial, if you will, numbers that'll help you get some data.
Hmm.
And then you have to remember, what is it that you signed up to do? What is your mission? What
Yeah.
is your vision? What's the work that you're setting out to do? And how do you believe you'll achieve and accomplish that? And if you have that as a foundation, then we can work with pulling together a model or a system that helps you track a lot of those activities.
Okay, so that's the great answer. So in other words, what you do is you'll work with the CEO, or would you work with the board, or both, and you would give them the tool. You would help them develop a tool
That's
that
right.
they could use
Yep.
to respond to these questions, and that tool might include. Correct me if I'm wrong, Sam, but you could start with some off-the-shelf software if you need that to get going. But you will help. I'm not trying to put
No,
words
that's
in your mouth, but
exactly.
you will sit down and say, look, I'm going to help you do this. You need to do it. I know how to do it, and this is how we do it. So let's get started.
That's right. Without giving out too much of the secrets.
No, don't. I know. Keep the secret to
you
yourself.
know,
But
but there
Sam,
is a
you made this. You earned it. You made the secret yourself. That's your secret sauce. It's proprietary, and God bless you for that.
Mhm. Yeah, but the point is that it can be done, and it's being done, and it's being done at a high level at this point now. And I think for organizations that really want to remain sustainable, there are a few things that they really have to take into account. One is that a software solution will help. Two is to diversify the way that they're getting their funding. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. If that funding goes away at the sway of the political regime that's going on now, that
Right.
could change. So
Right.
you really have to be able to think about your sustainability from a for-profit perspective. putting some of those things together where you're collaborating, where you're working with other organizations. And a lot of these funders are looking for that. In order, if you want to get the funding that you're looking for and you want to put out those proposals, make sure that you're adding in that you're working with other organizations, that you are diversifying your different funding streams, because they want to ensure that this $200,000 that they want to give you, that it's gonna, it's not gonna be going down on a sinking ship, but yet an organization that's gonna be thriving. And how do you prove that you're thriving? Impact and outcomes.
Let me ask you this: how long might a typical engagement be? Let's say a nonprofit engages you to do this work. Maybe would you be working with them for 3 months, 6 months, a year, or are there follow-up points as you go out longitudinally or not?
That's a great question and a very valid one. When we start working with organizations, we want to ensure that the first 3 months we're doing discovery. We're,
Yeah.
asking all of the questions, we're getting all of the information, how you're doing your business, what it is that you're looking to track, what is it that you're doing right now, what does your process look like? So there's a lot that goes into understanding the different ways in which
Okay.
organizations are structured and set up. So that would be about a 3-month process, depending on how big or how small the organization that we're working with. So
Okay.
you get to figure out how much goes into it at that point. Then, if we are suggesting a software solution, there's another maybe 3-month process, because you want to ensure that it's going to be a good fit. So there are different vendors out there that you want to be able to elicit to understand whether or not this is the right software for you for what you're trying to do. Whether it is
Gotcha.
you're making grants or you are seeking grants, things of that nature. So that will determine which way to go. Then it's probably another 3 to 6 months for implementation,
Yeah.
right? Which Coy Consulting Group does help with around that, ensuring that the right questions are being asked. If you remember,
Yeah.
if you ask it, you can track it,
Right.
but you don't want to track everything because everything's not super important. We want to track what's pertinent. So we'll figure that piece out, and then through implementation to ensure that everything is functioning properly, and training, because we also help training. The train the trainer model is important, but I think that when you have someone who's really knowledgeable about a product and knowledgeable about an industry and has the subject matter expertise to help lead you, it's a really nice setup to be successful and to be
Yeah.
able to go after those dollars the way that you really want to, and show that the funders are investing in your mission,
Yes.
your organization, and they have something that they can feel comfortable with, meaning that they have a subject matter expert who's working with you on the team to ensure success.
Gotcha. Let
That's
me ask
that's
you another question because and you mentioned something about the funder side of this. I mean, do you ever work on the funder side? I mean, I'm not. I mean, all the large private and public foundations and agencies that do the grants. Sometimes I've seen them come up in my career as a lawyer and otherwise. I've seen them come up with ideas and stuff that really weren't all that good. And when you control the pocketbook, and like
Mhm.
this is you have kind of a great deal of discretion about how you want things done.
Right.
But sometimes the funders need help with this too, right? I mean, you could go to a large grant making foundation that
Mhm.
that is onto this movement, but they're onto it in the wrong way, and that they're not looking at their potential grantees with
Right.
enough of the kind of you know uh, acumen, that your analysis brings to the organizations.
You know, this is a very interesting topic, and
Yeah.
there is an answer. The answer is that nonprofit organizations and leaders must work with their funders. There has to be a relationship that's worked on and being developed so that people on both sides can understand what the other is doing and what the
Yeah.
roles and responsibilities are. I think funders, for the work that I've done with funders in the past, is really predicated upon the funders understanding the circumstances in which nonprofits are finding themselves in, right? So
Okay.
if they have to, worry about keeping the doors open,
Right.
right, and they're looking for funding to help with that, that's very important, because you can fund a program, but that's not going to help fund the entire organization.
Right.
So there has to be some level of understanding around how that's happening. I got to tell you, the more relationship building that nonprofit leaders and funders in the community have, and the more that they do and the more that they work on with that, then the more likelihood that they'll be funded throughout. And that's important because sometimes you'll get funded for a year and that those dollars go away. Now you're, as an organization, you're looking for other ways to figure out how you're going to keep your doors open and keep your programs
Right.
running and being sustainable. So having freeing up those kinds of dollars is really, really helpful.
Yeah. Let me ask you one more question, then and I want to thank you in advance for taking the time to be here with us, Sam. And I really want to urge Tango members to reach out to you. But one last question, and that is one of my pet peeves is with boards of directors. You know,
So,
like I practiced law for 35, 36 years, worked with a lot of corporate boards and nonprofit boards of various types. And I guess my question is, are boards buying into this? Are boards thinking deeply enough? You know, all the volunteers, and it's great that they volunteer their time, but this is hard work. I mean, what you're describing as I'm listening to you is
mhm,
absolutely necessary work, but it's hard work and it demands a skill set, not only with senior management.
right.
You need a senior manager, CEO who can understand and implement this, but a board that will support the CEO and understand how important this this approach to quantify, what we
Yep.
do is going to become a
Mhm,
necessary part of the nonprofit culture. It already is, but you
right.
need boards who are on the ball and who are willing to work and help out with it.
Boards are very important in this whole process. I did a lot of research around, and my work is called, nonprofit sustainability through funder required performance measures. And it has a whole section about the importance of boards and nonprofit leaders and the accountability, because the CEOs are held accountable by the board. The board has a responsibility and has an accountability to ensure that the work is forth going, moving
Right,
forward.
right.
And, you know, you you have to remember that the board's responsibilities really are to ensuring that the organization is staying open and those doors are staying open. And then they look to the CEO or the executive director to be able to manage that, and then to manage the CFO who is in charge of the dollars, and to
Right.
be able to manage the operational costs, which then boils down to the programs and the services that are being delivered. I mean, how important is it to ensure the overall and overarching organization is running seamlessly if you don't have oversight, and that
Yeah,
oversight comes from the board.
yeah.
Boards
And
are
you need good boards. I mean, I there's in a different topic someday. I mean, I wrote an article a few years back about suggesting that it might be time to start paying your board members.
very
I know it's anathema to say that, but what I've said is that oftentimes the volunteer model just doesn't bring the talent that you need,
Mhm.
and that long term maybe this will happen, maybe it won't. But if you had a smaller board of really you pay people, and when you pay
Mhm.
someone they tend to pay attention, they'll show up for meetings, and if you
Yeah,
find the right people, maybe that'll give you a better engaged board. I don't know, that's a different topic. But look, Sam, I really want to thank you for this was great, and we're so glad to have you as part of Tango, and we're starting to grow this organization, and um, uh, I may come back to you. I may come back to you to ask you to do this again, or maybe we'll have you do a special program for our Tango, do a webinar or something for Tango members, where you can go into more of this detail.
yeah. Tango is a fantastic organization. I'm really glad to be a part of it. There's a lot of very talented, very smart people that are involved in Tango. Now, not just Koi Consulting Group, but a lot of folks who are doing really good work, and putting forth some best practices for organizations to be able to adhere to. So
Well,
yeah,
thank you
it's
for
an
that,
honor.
Sam. We're trying to do something different. We're trying to be a little bit different in the sector in the way we approach these problems, and we're thrilled to have you as part of our team. This is
I'm
great.
excited. Thanks, Jack. You're awesome.
Thank you, Sam. Likewise. Okay. I will we'll be in touch. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye bye.